They didn't scream. They didn't fight. They didn't even look angry. They just said it, like it was nothing. You eat, but you don't help. And in that moment, something inside me didn't break. It went silent. Not the kind of silence you hear. The kind of silence you feel in your chest, when your heart realizes something your mind has been ignoring for years. I stood there, frozen. Not because I didn't have words, but because I had too many years of cooking, years of cleaning, years of holding that house together when everything was falling apart, reduced to one sentence. You eat, but you don't help. Tell me something. Have you ever given everything to people, only to realize they were counting what you didn't do? That's the moment your soul starts asking questions. Was I invisible this whole time? Did they ever really see me? Or was I just convenient? I didn't argue, because sometimes when people show you how little they value you, the strongest thing you can do is not explain your worth. It's to stop offering it where it's not respected. That night, I sat alone in my room. No tears at first, just memories. The kind that hit you one after another, like waves you didn't prepare for. I remembered the nights I stayed awake when they were sick, the meals I cooked when I was exhausted, the sacrifices I never spoke about. And you know what hurt the most? Not that they forgot, but that they never noticed. That's a different kind of pain, because forgetting means it mattered once, but never noticing means it never mattered at all. And that realization, it changes you, slowly, but permanently. I walked into the kitchen that night. Same kitchen I had stood in for years, same walls, same table, but everything felt different. Not because the place changed, but because I did. It's strange how one sentence can open your eyes more than 1,000 experiences. You eat, but you don't help. That sentence wasn't just criticism. It was clarity. Clarity that I had been overgiving, over-sacrificing, over-loving, in a place that had quietly stopped valuing me. And here's the truth most people don't talk about. Sometimes the people you give the most to are the ones who appreciate you the least. Why? Because they're used to it, because your effort became their normal, because your sacrifice became their expectation. And once something becomes expected, it stops being appreciated. That night, something shifted inside me. Not anger, not revenge, awareness. And awareness is dangerous, because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. I sat there thinking, how long have I been living like this? How many times did I ignore the signs? How many times did I stay quiet just to keep peace? And then came the hardest question of all. Why did I accept this? That question, it cuts deep, because it forces you to take responsibility, not for what they did, but for what you tolerated. And that's where real change begins, not when they apologize, not when they change, but when you decide, this is no longer acceptable. That's the moment your life starts shifting. But let me be honest with you. That moment is not easy, because walking away from disrespect means walking away from familiarity, from routine, from history, from people you once called home. And that's terrifying, because the unknown always is. But staying in a place where you're not valued, that's not comfort, that's slow emotional damage. And I realized I had been choosing comfort over respect for far too long. So that night, I made a decision, not out loud, not dramatically, just quietly within myself. I'm done explaining my worth to people who refuse to see it. And sometimes that quiet decision is more powerful than any loud reaction. I didn't pack everything, I didn't slam doors, I didn't make a scene, because when your decision is real, you don't need attention, you need action. I lay down that night, but I didn't sleep. Not because I was overthinking, but because I was finally thinking clearly. And clarity can feel uncomfortable at first, because it forces you to face truths you've been avoiding for years. I wasn't just leaving a house, I was leaving a version of myself. The version that tolerated disrespect. The version that stayed silent. The version that kept giving even when it hurt. And that version was no longer me. Morning came, and with it, a strange feeling. Not sadness. Not fear. Something else, freedom mixed with uncertainty. Have you ever felt that? That moment where everything is unclear, but somehow it feels right. That's growth. It doesn't always feel good, but it always moves you forward. I got up. Looked around one last time. Not with anger. Not with regret. Just with understanding, because sometimes you don't leave because you hate a place, you leave because you've outgrown it. And I had outgrown a place where my value was invisible. So I walked out quietly. No one stopped me. No one asked me to stay. And that told me everything I needed to know, because when your absence doesn't create a reaction, your presence was never truly valued. Let that sink in. I stepped outside. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something shift inside me, not broken, not lost, awake. And that awakening, that's where everything begins. The first few days were the hardest, not because I didn't know where to go, but because I finally had space to feel everything I had been holding in for years. Silence followed me everywhere. No voices, no expectations, no one calling my name from another room. Just me and my thoughts. And that's where most people struggle. Because when life gets quiet, you start hearing the truth. I sat by the window one morning holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold, and I asked myself something I had avoided for years. Who am I when I'm not needed by others? That question, it shook me, because for so long my identity wasn't built on who I was. It was built on what I did for others. I was the one who fixed things, the one who showed up, the one who gave even when I had nothing left. But now, there was no one to fix, no one asking, no one expecting. And suddenly I felt empty. But here's the truth nobody tells you, that emptiness, it's not the end. It's the beginning. It's where you rebuild yourself, without pressure, without roles, without labels. But before rebuilding comes doubt. And doubt came quickly. What if I made a mistake? What if I should go back? What if they didn't mean it that way? That voice, it was loud and dangerous, because doubt doesn't come to help you. It comes to pull you back into the same place you finally had the courage to leave. I almost picked up the phone that day, almost. But then I remembered something. Respect should never need clarification. If someone can make you feel small, in a place where you gave your everything, that's not misunderstanding, that's truth, finally revealed. So I put the phone down. And in that moment, I chose myself again. You see, walking away is not a one-time decision. It's something you choose, again and again. Every time doubt tries to pull you back, days turned into a week, and slowly, something started changing. I began noticing things I hadn't felt in years, peace in small moments, silence that didn't hurt anymore. A sense of control over my own time. I could sit without being called, rest without feeling guilty, breathe without pressure. And that's when I realized something powerful. I wasn't losing anything by leaving. I was gaining myself. But life has a way of testing you. Right when you start feeling strong. One afternoon, I heard from someone. They're saying you overreacted. I paused. Of course they were. People who benefit from your silence will always call your voice too much. People who were comfortable with your sacrifice will always call your boundaries selfish. And that's when it hit me. They didn't miss me, they missed what I did for them. That realization, it changes everything, because it shows you the difference between being loved and being used. I didn't respond, because not every opinion deserves your energy, and not every misunderstanding needs your correction. Sometimes silence is not weakness. It's strength with discipline. But deep down, another thought began forming. A bold one, a scary one, a life-changing one. The house, that house, it wasn't just theirs. It was mine too. My effort. My sacrifices. My years were in those walls. And suddenly, I saw it clearly. I had walked away physically, but something still tied me there. And if I truly wanted to move forward, I had to let go completely, not emotionally, but practically. That's when the idea came. Clear, sharp, unavoidable. I'm going to sell the house. Even saying it in my mind felt heavy, because this wasn't just a decision, it was a declaration. A declaration that I was done being tied to a place where I was no longer valued. Fear hit immediately. What will people say? What if this creates conflict? What if they hate me? But then another voice, calmer, stronger, responded. They already didn't respect you. And that voice, that was the real me. The version of me that had finally woken up. So I sat there, feeling the weight of that decision, and I asked myself one final question. Am I doing this out of anger or self-respect? And the answer was clear. Self-respect. Because revenge is loud. But self-respect, it's quiet and firm. I didn't rush. I didn't announce it. I simply started taking steps, calls, documents, information. Each step felt surreal, like I was watching my own life change in real time. And with every step forward, the fear got a little quieter, and the strength, a little louder. But here's something important. Growth doesn't mean you stop feeling emotional. There were nights I questioned everything. Nights I stared at the ceiling wondering, is this too much? Am I going too far? Because when you start setting boundaries, it feels unnatural at first, especially if you've spent your whole life putting others before yourself. But discomfort is not a sign you're wronged, it's a sign you're changing, and change always feels unfamiliar. The process continued, slow but steady, and then one day it became real. The decision was no longer just in my mind that it was happening. And that's when something inside me shifted again. Not fear this time, power. Real power. Not the kind that controls others, but the kind that comes from finally taking control of your own life. I realized I wasn't the same person who walked out quietly. That version of me was hurt, confused, emotional. But this version was clear, focused, unshakable. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had lost anything. That I felt like I was reclaiming everything that was always mine. My peace, my voice, my worth. And soon they would realize it too. But not through words, through reality. Because sometimes the lesson people refuse to learn through respect, life teaches them through consequences. News travels fast. Especially when it's something people never expected. That I didn't call them, I didn't warn them, I didn't sit them down for a conversation. Because some truths don't need preparation. They need realization, and realization doesn't come from words. It comes from impact. The day they found out, I wasn't there. But I can imagine the moment. The confusion. The disbelief. The sudden shift in their voices. Wait, what do you mean? The house is being sold. That house. The place they spoke so casually in, the place where my value was reduced to nothing, was no longer secure. And suddenly everything changed. Because people don't always understand your importance when you're present. They understand it when something they depended on starts disappearing. My phone rang, once, twice, again and again. That I stared at the screen. Not with anger, but with calm. Because I already knew, this wasn't about me. This was about what they were about to lose. And there's a difference. When people truly value you, they show it before you leave. Not after. That I didn't pick up right away. Not because I wanted to ignore them, but because for the first time, I wasn't reacting, I was choosing. That's a powerful place to be, to not feel controlled by emotions or urgency or guilt. Just clarity. Eventually, I answered silence on the other side for a second. Then the questions came fast, sharp, almost desperate. Why didn't you tell us? How could you do this? Where are we supposed to go? I listened. Calmly. No interruptions. No defense, because I had learned something important. When people are used to having control, your independence feels like betrayal to them. Let that sink in. They weren't asking because they cared about me, they were asking because they were uncomfortable. Because for the first time they weren't in control of the situation. And then came the sentence, "You're being unfair." I paused. Unfair? After everything. After years of giving without recognition, after being made to feel like a burden in my own home. Now I was unfair? And in that moment, something inside me became completely still. Not hurt. Not angry, just done. Because when someone calls your self-respect unfair, it tells you everything you need to know about how they see you. I finally spoke, calm, slow, clear. I didn't leave to hurt you. I left because I was already hurting. Silence. You see, truth has a way of doing that. It doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be real. They didn't expect that response because they were ready for an argument. They were ready for emotion. They were ready for the old version of me. The one who explained, the one who justified, the one who tried to keep everyone comfortable. But that version, she was gone. And in her place was someone they didn't recognize anymore. Someone who had boundaries. Someone who had clarity. Someone who had finally chosen herself. The conversation continued, voices rising, tension building. But I stayed the same. Because when you're clear within yourself, you don't need to match other people's chaos. That's growth. They tried everything, guilt, blame. Even soft apologies that didn't feel real. You know, we didn't mean it like that. You're taking this too seriously. But here's the thing, people often minimize the very thing that broke you. Because if they admit it mattered, they have to take responsibility. And not everyone is ready for that. I listened, but I didn't absorb it. Because I had learned to separate words from truth. And the truth was simple. That sentence they said, "You eat but you don't help." It wasn't a mistake. It was a reflection of how they saw me. And I refused to go back to a place where I had to convince people to respect me, so I said something they didn't expect. I hope you find a place that feels like home. Not sarcastic. Not cold. Just honest. Because for me, that place was no longer home. And that's something many people struggle to accept. A house can stay the same, but the feeling inside it can change completely, and once that feeling is gone, there's nothing left to hold on to. The call ended. Not dramatically, just finished, and as I sat there afterward, I didn't feel heavy, I didn't feel guilty, I felt free. Truly free. Because I had done something most people avoid their entire lives, that I faced the truth, and acted on it, and that changes you forever. Days passed. The process continued, and slowly reality started settling in for them, because now it wasn't just a conversation that it was happening. The house was no longer theirs to depend on, and with that came understanding. But here's the truth, understanding that comes late doesn't undo the damage. It just explains it, and sometimes that's not enough. That I didn't celebrate, I didn't feel victorious, because this was never about winning. It was about reclaiming myself. And that's a different kind of success. Quiet, deep, unshakable. I started noticing something else too. The way I walked changed. The way I spoke changed. Even the way I thought changed, because when you stop tolerating disrespect, you start attracting something different. Better. Healthier. More aligned with who you truly are. But before that new life fully begins, there's always a moment of reflection. A moment where you look back. Not with regret, but with understanding. And I realized something powerful. I didn't lose a home. I outgrew a place that could no longer hold my worth. And that realization, it sets you free in a way nothing else can. Because now, you're not running away from something. You're moving towards something better. And that's a completely different energy. So if you're listening right now, and you're afraid of what will happen if you finally stand up for yourself, let me tell you this: yes, it will be uncomfortable. Yes, people will question you. Yes, some relationships will change. But you know what else will happen? You will find yourself. And once you do that, you will never accept less again, because you've seen what it feels like to choose yourself. And there's no going back from that. After everything settled, after the calls stopped, after the noise faded, there was just me. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. No tension in the air. No unspoken expectations. No quiet disrespect hiding behind normal conversations. Just peace. And peace is strange when you're not used to it. At first it feels unfamiliar, because your mind keeps waiting for something to go wrong. But slowly you begin to trust it. You begin to breathe deeper, sleep better, think clearer. And that's when the real transformation begins. Not when you leave, but when you start becoming someone new. I started noticing small changes: the way I spoke to myself, the way I carried my thoughts, the way I valued my own time. I stopped rushing for others, stopped explaining my decisions, stopped feeling guilty for choosing myself. And that shift, it changes everything. Because once you stop abandoning yourself, your life begins to align in ways you never imagined. I found new routines, simple things, morning walks, quiet tea without interruption, moments where I could just exist without being needed. And in those moments, I started rediscovering something I had lost years ago: myself. Not the version shaped by others' expectations, but the real one. The one who had dreams, thoughts, feelings that didn't revolve around anyone else. And let me tell you something: meeting yourself again after years of neglect, it's emotional, because you realize how much of yourself you gave away just to keep others comfortable. But instead of feeling regret, I felt gratitude, because I finally came back to me. And that's a powerful place to be. Time passed, and life slowly began opening new doors, not because I chased them, but because I was finally ready for them. You see, when you carry old pain, you block new opportunities. But when you release it, you create space. And life always fills that space. I started meeting new people. Different energy, different mindset. People who didn't see me as someone to use, but as someone to respect. And at first it felt strange, because I wasn't used to being valued without conditions. But that's what happens when you raise your standards. You stop attracting what you used to tolerate, and start attracting what you truly deserved. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. Not to them. Not to anyone. Because I had nothing left to prove. I already knew my worth. And when you know your worth, you don't chase validation, you live with confidence. And that confidence? It's quiet. Not loud. Not arrogant. Just unshakable. One day, I caught myself smiling for no reason. No big achievement, no major event. Just a simple moment of happiness, and it hit me. This is what peace feels like. Not dramatic. Not overwhelming, just steady. And real. And in that moment, I realized something that changed everything. I didn't just survive what happened. I grew from it because pain can do one of two things. It can break you, or it can build you. And the difference is the choice you make after it. I chose to rise. I chose to learn. I chose to never go back to a version of myself that accepted less than I deserved. And that choice, it shaped my future. Completely. Looking back now, I don't feel anger. I don't feel resentment. I feel understanding, because sometimes people don't hurt you because they're evil. They hurt you because they don't understand your value. And instead of trying to teach them, you need to choose yourself. That's the real lesson. Not everyone will appreciate you. Not everyone will respect you. Not everyone will see your worth. And that's okay, because your job is not to convince them. Your job is to recognize it yourself. And once you do that, everything changes. Your standards, your choices, your life. So if you're listening right now, and you feel stuck in a place where you're not valued, I need you to hear this. You don't need permission to leave. You don't need validation to choose yourself. You don't need anyone to agree with your decision. Because at the end of the day, it's your life, your peace, your dignity, your self-respect. And those things, they are not negotiable. Yes, it will be hard. Yes, people will question you. Yes, you will doubt yourself at times. But on the other side of that discomfort is freedom, real freedom. The kind where you don't have to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. The kind where you don't have to prove your worth because you already know it. The kind where you wake up every day at peace with who you are. And that is worth everything. So don't be afraid to walk away from anything that makes you feel less than who you are. Don't be afraid to close chapters that no longer serve your growth. Don't be afraid to choose yourself, even if it means standing alone for a while. Because that alone phase, it's not loneliness, that it's preparation for a life that finally matches your value. And one day, you'll look back at everything you went through, and you won't feel pain, you'll feel pride. Pride that you didn't stay where you were disrespected. Pride that you had the courage to walk away. Pride that you chose growth over comfort. And that is the moment you truly win. So stand tall. Choose yourself. Protect your peace. And never forget this: you are not difficult. You are not too much. You are not the problem. You were simply in a place that couldn't recognize your worth. And the moment you left, you didn't lose anything, you found everything. If this story touched something inside you, if you felt even a small part of this in your own life, then don't ignore that feeling, because that feeling, it's your truth trying to wake you up. And maybe, just maybe, this is your moment to choose yourself too. If you're ready for more stories like this, stories that remind you of your strength, your value, your power, make sure you stay connected, because your journey, it's just getting started. And the best version of your life is still ahead of you.